Thank you for joining LiTFUSE and Titan Arts and Humanities for our second installment of this year's LiTFUSE Online Summer School Poets and Conversation Series featuring our 2023 faculty. We are so happy to have you all here. My name is Jen Lin. I'm the LiTFUSE Program Director, here with my partner in crime, who's kind of in the background, my assistant, Laura Walker, who's here to help facilitate with any tech issues that anyone may have. And I just want to let you know, I am presenting this program to you this evening from my home in Yakima, Washington, about 20 minutes from the city of Titan. And I and Titan Arts and Humanities reside on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation. Titan Arts and Humanities, along with LiTFUSE, values all relationships that reinforce our commitment to art as a powerful tool for equity and diversity. And in recognizing the history and respecting the sovereignty of Washington's Indian nations, we recognize and honor these first people and their significant role today in stewarding these lands as they continue to honor and uphold their ancient heritage. LiTFUSE Summer School online offerings have been brought to you by our parent organization, Titan Arts and Humanities, along with generous grant support from Humanities Washington, the National Endowment for the Humanities, National Endowment for the Arts, Washington State Arts Commission, Yakima Chief Hops, Discurin Foundation, and Yakima Valley Community Foundation. I also like to give a shout out to our community partners, Inklings Bookstore, Fiesta Foods, Solberg Durrett and Associates, Yakima Coffee House Poets, and our many gracious individual donors. Of course, I'd also like to thank our 2023 LiTFUSE faculty, especially Javier, Elizabeth, and Lena, along with my assistant director, Laura Walker, for making these pre-program events possible. At this time, I'd like to ask you to please mute your audio and keep it muted throughout the presentation unless prompted to offer comments or questions by the faculty presenters. And we'll reserve the chat function for presentation-oriented responses. Please feel free, however, to private message Laura or myself with any LiTFUSE questions, pre-program, or about the upcoming workshop in September in Titan. And then now let's get on to our main event. This evening's talk is Occasionally Real, Writing a True Poem on Assignment, with our host faculty, Elizabeth Bradfield, Javier Cavazos, and Lena Krow. Writer naturalist Elizabeth Bradfield is the author of Toward Antarctica, Once Removed, Approaching Ice, Interpretive Work, and Theorem, a collaboration with artist Antonia Contrao. Her poems and essays have appeared in The Sun, The New Yorker, Atlantic Monthly, Poetry, Orion, and have been widely anthologized. Winner of the Audre Lorde Prize for the Publishing Triangle, finalist for the Lambda Literary Award and the James Laughlin Award from the Academy of American Poets. Her honors also include a Stegner Fellowship and a Breadloaf Scholarship. Founder and editor-in-chief of Broadside Press, she lives with her partner on Cape Cod, teaches creative writing at Brandeis University, and balances her work as a writer with work as a naturalist field assistant, both locally and abroad. Lena Krow is the author of the short story collection, I'm Fine, But You Appear to Be Sinking, from Featherproof Books 2017, and the novel Fire Season from Viking 2022, which was nominated for the Center for Fiction's first novel prize. Her second story collection, Sinkhole and Other Inexplicable Voids from Viking, is forthcoming in 2024. She lives in Spokane, Washington, with her husband and 2 children. Javier Cavazos is a performance artist and Grand Slam champion of the New Yo Recon Poets Cafe in New York City and a member of 3 National Poetry Slam teams. He is the author of 3 award-winning poetry collections, Barbarian at the Gate from Poetry Society of America, Diamond Grove Slave Tree from Ice Cube Press, and the Devil's Workshop Editor's Choice Award from Cleveland State University Poetry Center. Either it's already out, just come out hot off the press, or it's coming out very, very soon. Javier will have to explain that to you. And currently, Cavazos is a senior poetry editor for Poetry Northwest, directs the Liberal Studies program at Central Washington University, and serves on the board of trustees for Humanities Washington. He hopes to conjure. Please give a warm Zoom welcome to tonight's guest faculty, Elizabeth Bradfield, Lena Krow, and Javier Cavazos. Javier, you want to start us out?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just so I was just waiting. What a grateful. So grateful to be here, and grateful to see so many of you faces that I know. It's really feels good because I've been away for a little bit, and so it feels like I'm back home in Ellensburg a little bit, seeing everyone and in Yakima, and it feels great. So yeah, and I'm really grateful to LiTFUSE and to Jen and Laura for hosting this event and making these special moments for us to gather and to celebrate poetry and the craft of writing. And so that's kind of what we're on to tonight. Is we're going to talk a little bit about can you write a poem about this or about that, or what happens when you're solicited from an editor to write a poem about a particular subject. And really, you know, I guess the balance, or the two things here that we're really looking at, is how do you stay on task for what the editors are asking for, and then how do you not depart too far from the task at hand, from this lovely introduction that Elizabeth wrote, and what it's like collaborating and writing with editors like that. So I can speak on this on my part a little bit by this anthology, Columbia-based, or the Cascadia Field Guide, which is a really wonderful anthology collecting beings and fauna for the Northwest and the Cascadia. And I was tasked to write a poem about the Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit. And so I guess the first thing, you know, when you're, how do you stay true to a poem, is that...
Okay, wait a minute. Hav, should we say, like, you chose the Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit, yes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You made it sound like it was foisted upon you, but you chose the pygmy.
I know.
First of all, what's a Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit? What's it look like?
Yeah, okay, so it's the cutest little thing. I'm going to show you a picture of it, actually, to see. It's
so cute.
Yeah, and they're really tiny, right? And they're really tiny, and so, you know, it's native to where I am from in Central Washington. And as you start to research it, you want to stay true to what it is. But at the same time, I was writing this poem. You know, America was going through a lot of upheaval and social protest and injustice from George Floyd, and the Trump administration being on the rise. And so as I was researching it, I was finding out things that were predators to the rabbit itself, the pygmy rabbit. There were like bobcats and owls and weasels and ravens. And then I started, that's like the staying true to it. But when you start crafting a poem, of course, like Richard Hugo always says, is you let the poem conform to the music, not the music conform to the form, not the poem conforming to the form of it, but rather letting it go where the music goes. And really that's where I love to go in the creation of any writing, any true writing. To get to the truth of it is to follow the music. And so that's what was happening. And so as I was seeing these beings, like bobcat, raven, owl, weasel, I started projecting those on certain political figures. And so like Matt Getz, or I, you know, and I hate to say it, but in so many ways, the American farmer, which I felt was just, you know, sort of reinventing what patriotism was for us as Americans, especially as I was driving everywhere across the United States, and just seeing just radical changes in politics. And so I crafted this crazy poem. I think the first thing I wanted to say is that you need to, it's really important to know what's being asked of you, right? That's the most important thing, is to know what's being asked of you. And I just sort of hit the ground running, and without really knowing what was being asked of me in a general way. And I sent back this poem, which was like 1,100 words, and 5 pages and just this political rant. And I
It's
remember
true.
that,
And it was amazing. It was amazing, but also not appropriate for the task at hand.
not appropriate at all. Like it was totally crazy. Like, and I remember the email that I got back from the editors, and they were so wonderful and so nice, and they were like, "Pop, we get it, but you know, like supportive, but like, what the hell is this?" And I, you know, and I was like, you know, I'm a brown person, and I'm gonna, you know, and I'm gonna speak whatever I, you know, and it was just like this crazy moment in our world really happening. But and so I was just using that like, well, if someone's gonna ask for a poem, that's the poem I'm gonna write, right? And then they were really kind and patient. I think the most important thing is that I was blessed to have editors that were very patient with me, and then sent some galleys of some other or broadsides. I think they were broadsides of some other people that I'd done, and then I saw, oh, okay, this is like a field guide. Like, okay, duh, that's what it's called. It's called a field guide, and there's going to be some definition of what this being or the fauna is, or the things are, and then I craft a little poem for it. So, you know, I think that's the most important thing, is to know what's being asked, and then to in the first draft, let yourself go wild like I did. Like I really went wild, like it was crazy, right? And be willing to bend. You know, I'm going to read the poem that finally came out in the anthology, and it went from 1,100 words to maybe like 20 words, right? So, you know, it's kind of like that rule of thumb in research, like, you know, every 10 pages you get 1 page, or I can't remember what they would say. So someone once told me in grad school, like 10 to 1 or 100 to 10 or something like that. But it was almost like that for this. But, you know, I've had experiences in the past too, where I've been solicited for poems where it was just to write on a theme, and then you write on it, and there is really no dialogue back and forth. And on the creating side, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to change that, or I'm not willing to do the work, to do the revision. And then you're at a stalemate, and then kind of, you know, then it's a tough time, because then often, you know, just because you were solicited to write a poem doesn't mean they're going to publish it. And you know, I've been solicited many times to write a poem for something that never made it into the anthology. Just the editors weren't pleased with what I turned in. So that happens. So this crazy political rant, which several of you have already heard me read, you know, I go off and during the course of the research, it was the real predator of the pygmy rabbit is climate change. That's what it really boiled down to, that it's fire, right? And that it's the destruction of our planet that we're creating, this man-made predatory moment that's happening for all of us, including humans. And so, you know, several of you have heard me read the Fuego poem, where I just read fuego, 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 fuego. And so here I was able to turn it into the central claim of this poem for the Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit. So I'll read that, and then I'll turn it over to Elizabeth. Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit. When I dream, fuego is a bobcat's open mouth, an owl's turning eye gaze. When fuego dreams, raven, weasel, and even I are called by name. Kindle, kindle, kindling. So I don't know, Elizabeth, you want to maybe jump on from that and see how that echoed and how true it was to you and your experience in receiving that poem and asking poets for poems on subjects?
Yeah, I mean, I love that poem. I love that poem, Hav. I think I'm so happy that poem is in Cascadia Field Guide, and I think I'm especially happy knowing the journey of that poem. And I think you know, writing a poem to assignment, we do it all the time in workshops, like write a poem that's 14 lines and or write a poem with this metaphor. But writing an occasional poem and not only doing that in the privacy of a workshop but with the expectation of publication is a really different thing. So the so for Javier's poem, we were talking about Cascadia Field Guide, and we had 40 poems, 40 poets that we asked to write to the beings of Cascadia, and that's one thing. But I don't know, I think we're all asked, I think a lot about um uh like love child, and I'm totally blanking. Why do I not have that book right in front of me? It's but the idea of writing occasional poems, which has been a little bit demeaned in our culture, right? We have occasional poems for presidential inaugurations, for all these occasions, but why do we not kind of embrace the occasional poem? I've had to write occasional poems for weddings, and for field guides, not Cascadia Field Guide, but for the Northern Appalachian Guide. And it's really intense to be given a poem on assignment and to know that you've got to bring your craft to this moment, and also to bring like all of your emotional self, your physical self, your embodied self, your weird self, to really honor that that embodiment of the poem, but also to speak to what's being asked. So to answer the assignment, but also to be true to yourself. And I think it's a real big challenge. And I think what I love about Javier's poem is that the Columbia Basin Pygmy Rabbit poem that he read and shared is all about fuego. Like, it's not about the life history of the Columbia Basin Pygmy Rabbit, but it's about that relationship to fire. It brings in language. It's so visceral and embodied. And that's what I love about that poem. And that's why it feels so right as an occasional poem or an assignment poem for this guide. I've had the I've written to assignment in a few occasions in my life. I think the biggest occasion is working in collaboration with a visual artist, with Antonia Contro, and she was like, "Hey, Liz, what if you write a poem in response to these images that I've made?" And I was like, okay. And working with her and working from that assignment and creating the poems that are Theorem was really freeing and exciting. But I think that the dynamic between when I write a poem that feels drawn from my life, that feels drawn from the everyday, it has a different set of expectations and parameters from poems that are written to assignment and that I know are going to be in conversation with someone else's work, whether that's a visual artist or a bigger collaboration as a whole. And I wonder, Hav, if you can talk about when you were thinking about that Columbia Basin Pygmy Rabbit, like, what was your research and what was your process in coming into that poem? And aside from George Floyd, aside from kind of thinking about environment, how did you come into aligning your understanding of the Columbia Basin Pygmy Rabbit and also your understanding of social justice and this being?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I do is just find out as much as I can on a scientific level. You know, I'll often say it doesn't matter what the poem's about, that there should be a moment of science in the poem. And for me, what that does is that everything that we could write about, whether it's love or a bicycle, or the farmer's market, or even the farmer's market, if we look at that, there's tables and tents and people and motion, and there's a science to all of that. And there's so much information out there now so I always try to say, if you're going to write a poem, it doesn't matter what the poem's about, that there needs to be some science about the subject, whatever the subject is. So I immediately wanted to know, about the biology of the pygmy rabbit, about its habitat. The habitats really became fascinating for me. What it eats, what its patterns, its sort of migration patterns, and then through that, what preys on the rabbit, and then of course that becomes interesting to me just as a human. That we're in this sort of animal predatory chain. So then I was looking at where the pygmy rabbit is on that, and came across a group of pygmy rabbits that were that almost became extinct because of the fires. That's their number one problem, or their number one concern about existence is the yearly fires that we have. And then so that's where the fuego came in for that. So the science answers, for me, it always answers the so what question. Why should someone care about this poem, or make it, try to make it more interesting in that way? So I guess that answers that question there. And fire then translated to aside from the pygmy rabbit, again, this is where, and as we're going to have you do a prompt and write a specific poem as well and share back with us. But it's about how true can you stay to it, but also where do you depart from that? And so the departing for me was on this intense wave of social injustice that was happening everywhere, and climate being one of those things that was politicized, and so definitely polarizing our country into, is climate change real? Is there climate change? Who says if, and we're seeing the effects of it. And this poor little tiny helpless being was suffering the most terrorizing effects of climate change. And so that's how I was able to then say, okay, this is still very much a social justice poem. The spirit, or the music that led that, definitely still stayed true to that. And it's by discovery. Again, it goes back to the discovery of following the music when you write, to not allow yourself that filter in those first drafts.
I love that idea of an awareness really pressurizing what's behind a poem. That there's all this stuff behind a poem, and it might not be enacted in every line of the poem, but it's pressurizing the expression of a poem. And Hav, could you, with all that you just said, could you read the poem one more time so we can be with the
Sure.
Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit?
Sure. And this is written from the pygmy rabbit's voice. So this is in the voice of the pygmy rabbit, because the pygmy rabbit learned English and
and poetry.
Yeah. When I dream, fuego is a bobcat's open mouth, an owl's turning eye gaze. When fuego dreams, raven, weasel, and even I are called by name. Kindle, kindle, kindling.
Elizabeth, I have a question for you. So you said that for the anthology, you guys had reached out to 40 poets. Was there a plan for if somebody wrote something that did not fit with the anthology? Was it like, well, we'll see what we get? Or was it like, no, we're going to include all of these people, even if somebody writes, you know, something that's taken a turn away from what we wanted? Because it sounds like you guys had quite a back and forth, right? You had to make the piece work for the intention of the book.
We did, like, even with Javier, you know, the his first poem was really long that he sent us.
Yeah, that's a long
And it
poem,
was
1,100 words.
it was too long for what the vision of the book was. And so there was a back and forth and a conversation about how the poem could fit in the vision of this particular book. And I'm sure at some point, I haven't talked to Hav about this, but he was like, you guys, honestly, why are you cramping my style, right? How come you guys are pushing on this? But and I'd love to hear what you have to say, Javier, but for us, like, our vision for this book was that a reader could come in and engage the truth of the being, a Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit, and to understand that through the biology, the cultural, and traditional ecological knowledge, through the poem, through the art, and kind of be there, right there, immediately in a moment. And what Javier first sent was a beautiful, amazing response and poem, but it that first response was so much more about the poet's self and less about the Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit. It was so much more about the interpretation and less about the being. And for this guide, we wanted things to be about the being. I don't know. What do you want to say, Hav? Uh-oh, you're muted.
There, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was total departure. Like, you know, it was total departure from the task at hand, right? And so then it's, do you want to be part of this collaborative process, right? And so that's the key thing, I think, even in the description of this class on how to handle those things. It's like, how do you stay true to what's being asked? And then how much are you willing to depart so that you're still making art? And then are you willing to collaborate in a real way that's gonna end up having a result? And often what I say in workshop is, you know, let's all submit to the process. Like, and so, you know, there was a point where I just said, I have to submit to this process. And if it's going to work, I'm just going to submit to it. I'm going to put my, you know, just kind of forget about what I thought about the idea and just submit to what I'm hearing in the email responses from the editors, and trust their vision. And then something really grew, something really amazing grew, something that I had no idea that was going to happen, which is sort of the discovery of writing always, right? Is that you begin writing and you never know where the writing is going to go, you know? So should we try something?
Yeah, I think we should. And I think, yeah, I think we should.
Is everyone willing to write a occasionally real true poem on assignment? Can you write a poem about this request? And can it be a creative spark, or is it going to be a terrifying ask?
Or
What do y'all
both.
think? Yes, or both. Yeah, or both. Right? Okay. Liz, should we say the criteria, or who wants to say the criteria?
I'll start and then you can add, right?
Okay.
Here's your assignment. You must write a poem about the Perseid meteor showers of August 2023, and your poem must be limited to 14 lines. It doesn't have to be a sonnet per se, but it's got to be kind of short. But write a 14-line poem about the Perseid meteor showers of 2023, which are just happening now, and let it be real. What do you want to add, Hav? I can put it in chat as well.
Okay. There should be a sense of smell and an imaginative leap within the poem.
Yeah, what do those meteors smell like? I'm down. Let's hear it.
Yeah.
It's
And
wild because it's a different prompt than you guys were talking about before we got on the chat. You guys are
and this
flying
poem
by the seat of your pants. I like it.
will be shared at an astronomy convention. It's in the chat. So let's take 10 minutes. It's 10:06 Eastern time. So whatever that is, 7:06. Let's take until 16 after, 15 after. We can turn off our little videos and whatever, and work on that, and we'll come back and see what happens, and think about what's frustrating and what's interesting, and think about especially thinking about your audience. If this is for an astronomy convention, how do you engage them? How do you push against that? How do you reach toward that? And let's see what happens. 10 minutes.
And the science of the meteor somehow, whatever that means.
Maybe.
Better Google it real quick. Everybody just quick Google
Exactly.
and put in
Okay.
poem.
So we'll see you at 7:17.
Sweet. I'm gonna get another beer.
5 more minutes, everyone. Okay, you've got 1 minute. and find the end of what you're writing. I will admit, I did not include a sense of smell in my poem. But I did think about the astronomy convention. I think what I love about writing for an assignment is what we do so much in writing workshops, but writing with a particular audience in mind is a really different question. And what I love about writing an occasional poem is how in the writing we're both honoring and pushing against the expectations of who will hear it. I'm wondering if folks want to share. Also, if anyone wants to raise their hands, how many of you went out last night, the night before, whatever, to go see the Perseid meteor showers?
Some
Oh, shoot.
criminal tipped my 6-year-old daughter off that there was a meteor shower, and she came down the stairs at like 9 o'clock when she was supposed to be in bed, and she goes, "Mom, are there meteors tonight?" And I lied, and I was like, "Nope, go back to bed." So that was bad parenting. I should have she's a little poet at heart. She wanted to see the meteors.
Oh my God,
But I
that is
also
a
need her
poem.
to
Did you write
sleep.
about that?
No.
Can you share what you wrote?
Oh, I didn't write anything. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
No.
Right.
No, like I said, I'm the fiction interloper here, but I'd love to hear, but people can only share if they included the smell part. That was the best part.
Well, no, people can share no matter what. But I do love that you're like, no meteor shower, go back to bed. Who wants to share? Great. I see you, Chris Jeffress.
I really don't want to share this, but I'm going to for the sake of this night, and just to be a good sport about it, because this is not my thing to do a spontaneous exercise like this. But I'm giving it a go for what it's worth. So my family actually was. Some of my family we were on an outing in in a cabin in Cleellum together, and some of my daughter, my granddaughter, and stuff went out into the pickup, and we were surrounded by a bunch of trees, but there was a clearing, and they were watching the shower with sitting in the bed of the pickup, and I wasn't. But anyway, here it is. From a clearing in the forest, watching the drag of air on the rocks, sparking across the sky, the scent of pine settling into our sense of mystery and amazement.
It's so beautiful. And I think about the astronomy convention and how they would love to know that they're like all of their nerdy science-ness, right? They get to have this embodied self of wonder. That to me, I think pushing against the science-ness to the embodied self is so cool about that. Thank you. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love the scent of pine too.
Yeah.
You better, since you required something like that.
Who else wants to share?
I'll share.
Great.
I didn't get the scent.
I see Brittany and I see Michael, but yeah, both of you. Brittany, go ahead.
Oh, there's no smell. You can imagine it. All right. How to begin when my own sky is far from dark. City lights yearning to meteor themselves ablaze, streak toward invisible stars. This earth on which I rock my face upward, even now is passing through debris. Ice and rock orphans left behind by a comet set on swifting anywhere else. But from here, street lamp sentries guarding our bright sprawl, I cannot see the Perseids, their showers and trails, can only imagine how they crisscross the Milky Way, how they firework the stars that I can only trust are spilling toward me.
Yes, that I can only trust, right? The scientists can't write that shit. They can't embody the emotional. They can't hold that personal stuff. I mean, that's what a poem can offer, right? As a conversation. And thank you, Brittany. That's so beautiful. Michael, Michael, you had your hand up about sharing. Will you share?
Yes. I had a profound experience last summer. So this is about the 2022 Perseids. So there's some poetic license for you. And I don't think I have a sense of smell yet. This is what I came up with. Fireflies. We had our cabin by the ocean near Nia Bay for a weekend during the Perseids. No light pollution. Fortunately, no fog. Late that first evening, I asked my wife and kids to step out to the beach. Look up, I said, and keep looking up. Our necks began to hurt, but with patience, there they were, the streaks, a minute or so apart, surprising flashes across a small part of the sky, flaring and fading like fireflies in our windswept planetarium. Perhaps we should have taken a blanket to lie on the sand, saving our craned necks. But for those short moments, it didn't matter. Those moments of sharing a rare view, recognizing the strength and wonder, sharing a short streak of being together.
Yeah. That idea of the body observing, right? Versus what science knows, the body learning and being of the moment. I think that is the counterpoint that poetry can offer, right? I saw Ed, you wanted to share, and maybe Joanna wants to share.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
This morning's newspaper asked me to smell a star. The Perseid meteor showers are, I can't remember writing, are raining down over my head. And I am reaching up to embrace the fire, the light from beyond. How does one taste a star? How does one kiss a star? Is it like kissing fire? I did that once on a dare, stuck a lighted match in my mouth. Indeed, an otherworldly experience. Tonight, I will be content to look and just imagine the smell of starlight, the taste of fire on my tongue.
Oh my God, that bet? Oh yeah, to stick that thing in your mouth?
Yeah.
That's so good. It's so good.
Thank
Like,
you.
what are the, I see Samuel, and I know that, wait, was it Joanna? You said you wanted to share? Yeah. Great. Let's hear Joanna and then Samuel.
It would take me a week to write 14 lines. Mine is short, but Hav, I'm going to do it in the voice of the meteor, like you did in the voice of the rabbit. Oh, stargazer, here is my bright flash of light, like a match strike, a sniff of sulfur, a shower of sparkle, glitter, a piñata of sweets bursting.
Yeah. Smell, piñata. Yes. Samuel, will you share yours? Wait, where are you? Unmute yourself.
Oh, is my microphone not working?
Now you're good. Yeah.
So for my imaginative leap, I can smell the meteor. Streams of ice, rock, and dust trail from this swift Gorgon slayer. Once a year, I smell the bitter bite of mythology and science converging into one. The Perseids meteor is a wonder to behold, and with a storm brewing in just 5 years' time. Tonight, I sit back in my lawn chair, my childhood telescope resting on my knee. I gaze into the night sky and wonder once more, if meteors smell this good from way down here, what would happen if one fell into my drink? Would I taste science or myth or both?
Yeah, what's it taste like?
Delicious. These are amazing. So
Wait,
what?
can I read the one that was posted in the chat? Shalom Cook.
Sure.
Can I read it out loud for everybody? I'm
Sure.
going to do it in my poet voice, which might also be my NPR voice. We'll find out.
I don't know if I trust that you have a poet voice, but go ahead.
Oh, burn! But do I have an NPR voice? We'll
I don't
find
know.
out.
Let's see.
All hail the night where love mirrors fury, dancing thunderbird, soaring 400 miles an hour to the drum of a forgotten song, telling a tale that refuses to be lost. Lucifer's breath smells of pine and a quiet freedom, but in its wake something died, and lands as August's magic against the midnight sky. Thanks, Shalom.
Thanks for reading that. I actually was putting it so I could just have it to read in case I decided to, and then I
Oh, I'm sorry. I
no,
stole your...
thank you. I appreciate it. I wasn't good.
Wait, do you want to do it too so we can hear your poet voice?
No, I think you did. Okay. All hail the night where love mirrors fury, dancing thunderbirds soaring 400 miles an hour to the drum of a forgotten song, telling a tale that refuses to be lost. Lucifer's breath smells of pine and a quiet freedom, but in its wake, something died and lands as August's magic against the midnight sky.
Oh, that was better. Your poet voice is better. That was good.
What is it that changes a poem when you know that it's for an occasion versus from the heart? And I really mean this as a question for all of you. I mean, for me, I think a lot more of audience from the get-go than I do when I'm just writing for myself. What else changes for you when you're writing to assignment for an occasion? How is it helpful or challenging or interesting for you?
Really a lot of pressure. I'm not sure that I'd come up with much of a song very quickly. It takes me a long time to write something, like Joey was saying. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd even want to agree to do something like that, at least at this stage in my journey.
I see Jill wants to read her poem, and then I also see Michael has his hand up to say something.
Just quickly, I would say what motivated me is thinking about reading this for that convention be intimidating, that I couldn't match the science. So I thought, well, I'll just tell a story.
Right? Yeah, let the poem do a poem's work. You don't have to do all the work, right? Especially if it's an occasional poem. Like, think about it, for a newspaper, for an occasion, for a convention. Let the poem be the poem. In a weird way, it's kind of freeing, right? Let the poem do a poem's work. It doesn't have to do all the work. I don't know. For me, in some ways, like, that kind of assignment is like, go ahead, be your freaky self in the best kind of way. I don't know. Jill, you want to read your poem?
Hello. Okay. I look to Perseus on a clear August night. Comet scraps fly across the sky, discarded pieces of a cosmic collision. The green icy glow pierces through me. and I smell the iron of blood and stars. I make a wish and another, tossing nickels into a fountain of stars. It feels selfish to look for more, to wish for more, but the stars are loud and I can't help but listen as they call me home.
Nice.
The stars are loud.
Jampa, did you have something you wanted to contribute?
You're on mute, Champa.
Is that it? Is that good?
Yeah.
Like, I don't write from prompts. I mean, for me, everything is an occasion. So I just write from whatever the occasion is. And sometimes it's a wedding. Last week it was a birthday. So I get inspired because it's what it is. So this one comes as a prompt, but it reminded me of the tape reading this morning about the mess that people left on the beach watching the Perseid meteor shower. So it left me with this kind of depressed feeling. I mean, I have watched the showers with a lover in my arms, and I could write that. Scientist, I report from my Earth beach, the smell of trash, stargazers left, the Perseids themselves, the debris left from 109 Swift Tuttle Comet. It's a science piece there. What next? Cosmic embarrassment will reveal our dark, increasingly Medusa night. Yeah.
Or Medusa night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's where we are. Perseus remains. So yeah, nice to have you folks here. Look forward to working with you, collaborating. As a publisher, I often find that it's very difficult to work with poets because they have so many ideas the way the book should be, but most books tend to have their own form, you know, from the house, from the tradition of that house.
We have
They
so many
often need a little
ideas. It's true.
persuading to give up certain preconceptions of the way they think the book should be. Right
Ed,
off?
I see you've had your hand up a couple times.
Me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the idea of an assigned poem, you know. I was a newspaper journalist for my career, you know, for many years. And everything is about assignment, you know. I mean, you go out and you gather the facts and you report the facts and so forth, you know. And you know, trying to write a poem is a lot harder than trying to write a news story. And the idea of following the science, you know, so this kind of a poem that you're talking about is kind of a blend of fact and fiction, right? So there's a good side and a bad side to that. If it's just pure imagination, you can just kind of, you know, go with your emotions, you know, go with your gut. If you have an assignment, you know, if you're kind of restricted by facts and so forth, you do kind of have to change the way you write the poem. And I think you do think about your audience a lot. You know, is this audience going to, how's the audience going to receive what I'm writing here? You know, so I noticed that in myself, you know, when I'm writing a poem, say an assigned poem like for a wedding or whatever, you know, it's kind of like being a journalist again. You know, you sort of have to think about, well, how is the audience going to receive this, you know? And then if that requirement isn't there, then and if you're just left to your imagination, it's like, well, what the hell, you know? And you know, anything goes. So there's a real separation there, difference, I think.
You know, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
I was just gonna say I'm so with you. I'm also a former journalist, and I feel that experience very similarly in that when I'm asked to write creative work on assignment, it does sort of harken back that feeling of being asked to write something for the paper, and it allows me a little bit of distance of like, oh, well, this isn't what I would have done for myself. I'm being asked to do it, and there's a freedom in that. But still also, you know, as you said, that terror of, but it's not reporting, it's creative work, and it comes, you know, from the heart, and that dichotomy between the two. But I think that, you know, so many folks really struggle with that, where to put themselves when they're asked for something that isn't their own work. And so I've always been grateful for that experience, you know, having been a journalist and being able to say, okay, I can go write about anything, but I think it still doesn't make it easy, right?
Yeah. No,
And I think there's the flip side of that, which is that for poets, it can feel like it's not a real poem if you're writing it on assignment for something, right? And I think I'm gonna post in chat a link. Sorry to the bad bookseller, but Nikki Finney's book about Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry. Like, Nikki Finney loves the occasional poem. She loves being asked to be a public poet, to be asked to write a poem for the inauguration of something in response to a piece of visual art, and to have that kind of public role, which I think we've kind of stepped away from, except for really rarely, right? Inaugurations, Maya Angelou, Robert Frost, oh crap, what's her name? Amanda Gorman. Poets who speak to these big public inaugurations of presidents, but there are also all of these other occasions. And so it can be the journalist's question of, is it too personal? And then it can be the poet's question of, does it really count as a poem if it's speaking to this assignment? And I'm really interested in that line between these two spaces. And I think Nikki Finney and her embrace of the occasional poem is in some ways so refreshing and
Can I ask
invigorating.
about the notion of, does it really count as a real poem? Is that because there's something definitional in poetry that it has to be organic from the author? What does that mean exactly?
I think it's like, does it count because you know you're writing for something? So is it pure, and is it from the heart, and is it engaged, or are you crafting something? I don't know. What do you think, Hav?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. It's like it's not coming from you know, it's like what Jampa Richard Denner was saying, that, you know, like the trouble with working with poets is that, you know, we have all these different ideas and we want to be really truthful to where it's coming from, somewhere deep in our bosom, you know. And so, yeah, so it's like, you know, and then, you know, I don't know, there's some poets that kind of have come from the school that when you're writing about something that, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way to any journalist, but that it's just sort of like you're just being a journalist, right? Like you're just like poeticizing the news of the day, right? And that poetry, like with the capital P, should be this art, that you're making art the way you're making a painting. And you know, Tony Doerr, who also writes fiction, says he writes his novels one sentence at a time, where it's just the lovely sentence after lovely sentence after lovely sentence, and there's not this sort of master idea. And so I think sometimes that you know, and trends change too, you know, in the types of poetry, but yeah, that it comes from this, you know, more reverent space, which is all BS, you know, in the grand, you know, in whatever it is, but in those holy bowels of institution, that's where that I think comes from.
And I'll be honest, like I think when I've been asked to write a poem for an occasion, I think like the weird kind of messed up little I want to do right by the thing good girl in me, right? I have to really try and find a way to honor the assignment, and then also to ask myself, all right, how is this true? And even if it's subversive to the question that's being asked or the moments that's being asked, how, and I think for me, that question of honoring the assignment and also challenging it or figuring out a way to be true to the question that might end up challenging it is, for me, the most interesting thing about an occasional poem. Like if I'm asked to write a wedding poem, all right, well, honestly, I hate weddings. I hate them. So how can I honor love and these people and also be true to the fact that fuck weddings, they're so stupid. Sorry to all you people who love weddings, but I really hate them. So that tension for me is really interesting to explore when I'm writing. And I think the more I can honor that tension between the parameters of the assignment and the truth of my own expression, that's where, for me, the writing gets interesting and messier and more challenging and hopefully good.
I mean, yeah, that's probably what makes for a good poem, right? When you're like, oh, these things are pulling against each other. Just, you know, Javier in the example of your poem for the field guide. But it's so, you know, it's so interesting coming from a fiction writer's point of view. I consider if what I've written for an assignment is something that I would have written on my own. Is it true to what I maybe necessarily wanted to say? But I'd never consider whether or not it was a story. It's always a story, you know? And so the notion of poetry just as being so personal to personal expression is intriguing to me, just coming from that different genre. And then I think there's hindsight too, right? So if you ultimately like what you end up writing and you get good response from it, then are you kind of like, oh yeah, it was more of a poem than I thought it was. So I definitely feel that way about fiction sometimes. Like sometimes I'll write things for an anthology. I'll be like, well, there that is. And then, you know, if you get a good response, you're like, oh yeah, no, I love that now. That's the best one.
Might be more freeing or fun, whatever, to write for an anthology based on a specific theme than to write something that's more specific, like a field guide kind of thing, where, you know, there's science involved and all of that. But like an anthology, maybe of epistolary poems or, you know, some other theme where you can go off on, you know, sing your own song, or, you know, when you're writing. I just think that would be kind of fun.
Joanna, you had your hand up.
When I said it would take me a week to write this assignment, I would need 6 days just for the research and then compress all of that into a poem probably in one afternoon. So I think the pleasurable thing about writing to assignment, like when Rena Priest asked us to write salmon poems, was that I knew nothing about salmon and had to educate myself about their habitat and their life cycle, et cetera, which is what Hav did for his rabbit poem. So I think that's part of the allure with the request, is to go and research meteors. I knew nothing. So yeah, so you've got all this research that has to happen first before you even feel intimate with the subject. So that's all I'm saying.
Are you in Priest's anthology? She's here in Spokane at the end of this week. I'm looking forward to meeting her.
Ah, I am. Lots of us are. Who else is in it? Ed, you're in it.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What's in Spokane?
Venus.
Rena Priest. She's
Oh.
going to be reading from the Salmon Anthology. You have work in it?
I do, yeah, I
Very
do.
cool.
That. However, I didn't know about that event, so I'm not sure. I don't think I'll be in Spokane, but I wish I could be in Spokane, but
Or at least I assume it's for the anthology. It could be she could be doing other stuff. I don't know. I'm supposed to have beer with her on Thursday. You guys
Is this-
laughed when I went to get another beer, but it makes the literary world go round.
is this like next weekend? Is that what you said?
She's in town on Thursday for an event, and I assumed it was for the anthology, but it could be something else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Brittany, I see your note in the chat, and I was thinking also about for a while there was the New York Times assignment. I think Monica Yoon was one of the poets who was like, she was in the NPR news office, and I think it was NPR, she got all the headlines, and then she was like, okay, 30 minutes, write a poem. It's got to happen from today's news. And that kind of pressure, I don't know, it's kind of awesome and kind of terrifying and kind of wonderful. Like, maybe if you do that often enough, you let go of some of the preciousness, but the idea that you could quickly turn around, how do you feel not like a hack in something like that, I think is the question. And how do you feel like you're genuinely engaging? And I think, to do that in 24 hours, it's kind of tough to not be like, all right, well, let me fall. I was listening to Amy Irvine at the Orion Environmental Writers Workshop earlier this summer, and she was like, the brain uses more energy than any organ in your body, and the brain's energy is like, how can I keep doing my thing and conserve all my energy? How can I not use energy? So we want to go the familiar route, right? So to make the brain jump out of the rut and do something new, do something interesting is asking a lot. So to be asked to do something on assignment and to not go the conventional route, to allow yourself to go in an unexpected route, to challenge yourself, to leap out of the rut, to give that extra energy, I think is the question of the occasional poem. And I think it's what makes it great. Anyway, that was a big jumble of stuff. So I don't know if that kind of speaks to what you were talking about a little bit, Brittany. But it's a challenge, right? To not, because there's the easy route, right? We can all do the easy route. Like, I know how to write a wedding poem. You love stuff. You love each other. Beautiful love, blah, blah, blah. But how do we make a poem that feels true to us as writers, and also honoring the question and the request of the occasional poem? And I think it's hard.
First up, I'm here for your wedding hatred, even though I got married, but I like it. And secondly, yeah, it is hard. And there's something very now I will sit up and be a professional about it too,
Right.
to say I will do the hard thing. And honestly, that prompt that you just mentioned, to think about writing something in 30 minutes, even to think about writing something in 24 hours is really intimidating. Here in Spokane, every year, the local paper, The Spokesman, does, I don't know if you guys elsewhere in the state maybe read these if you have a Spokane connection, summer stories where they publish fiction in the Sunday edition, and it's like an author a week. And I've been asked to do these a number of times, and they give you about a month, and there's a prompt and a word count. And I find it terrifying to even have a month. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I cannot write a story in a month. So to think about, a half-hour increment or a day's increment, it's impossible not to feel like a hack a little bit when you're like, well, I just cranked that out. But there is something about sometimes that's the work of being a writer. Sometimes that's the job, and that feels good.
And what an honor to be asked.
It is. It's always an honor to be asked, no matter what, like big or small. If somebody wants you to write something, even if it's a wedding, like it is, it's an honor.
Besides, you can always take what you've written, you know, as imperfect as it is, and you can keep working on it. And once the occasion's gone by, it doesn't mean you can't still keep the same piece and improve on it, you know?
Yeah. I see Michael's hand.
Yes, I'll speak up. I was reminded with this topic of a quote that I used in an essay once years ago, and I found it, and I'll paste it into the chat. It's from Diane Wachowski. She said, "I've always rejected the idea of occasional poetry, a poem for your host, a birthday poem, a wedding poem, etc. Then I realized they were the only poems anyone other than poets read. So maybe that's a motivation."
Totally. Do you believe it? What do you think about that quote?
I don't think I believe it entirely. I think there's lots of people who are not poets who read and enjoy poetry. I have a little bit more optimism than that. But I think it's true that occasions will get poetry to people who don't normally read poetry. Yeah. And that's a valuable opportunity. And there you have to think about audience and expectations. If you're John Ashbery, you're going to have trouble with the general audience, maybe. But if you're Mary Oliver, perhaps not. But I think you want to think about your audience.
And what is the function of poetry, right? Like, okay, please give me a poem for my grandmother's funeral. Right? I mean, that's a question I've been asked, and to think about what poem will serve, and not to write something, but to even to find something is a really interesting. How do you find that blend of something that honors but also isn't sappy and saccharine and fits the occasion? And it's a really interesting request, you know?
That's my worst nightmare, to have to write something for a funeral. I would quit. I'd say I have a different job now. I'm an auto mechanic.
I had to write a piece for my grandmother's funeral. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Not a poem, but it was just a, you know, kind of remember.
Still, right? Like, how do you be true to yourself? How do you be true to the person? How do you honor the occasion? And how do you write something that feels genuine? I think it's a really hard ask. And I'm interested in that question. And I don't know, like when I think about Hov's poem about the Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit, and the way that, because he knew that that rabbit would be in context, and we get just to have that fuego, that kindling at the end, and how fire is so important to that, because he knew the context of the poem and the context of where it would be, and how he allows the poem to just be itself in that moment. I think there can be a freedom in an occasional poem too, right? This is a poem to be read at a funeral, at a wedding, at a bat mitzvah, at a whatever. There's so much that is given to the context of that poem that you don't need to put into the poem. That's really interesting. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that, Hav, a little bit, or?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been really a blessing here today. Like, just getting everyone to see how everyone stuck to the task at hand, but also seeing the departure points where, like, the music was happening, and I'm just, you know, it's really gratifying to know that we are beings that gather and celebrate language and occasion and ceremony. You know, ceremony has a big thing to do with what we do, in its own ways, or gathering even, you know, the way we gather and why we gather, and the words that we use to sort of mix in that bowl of preparation for the sustenance, you know. And you know, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that was the answer to that, but I just wanted to really resound that the gratefulness to be here and to have an opportunity to hear all of you and to be in conversation with you all and to get to know everyone even more on an intimate level, just by writing an occasional poem. I think that, you know, I always say that poetry allows us to reveal our inner selves in ways. And I think even with an occasional poem, that's true. Something leaks out, you know, and it's really interesting and beautiful.
I don't think there could be a better way to end tonight than what you just said.
Yes. Thank you so much, Javier, Liz, Lena, especially you, Liz and Javier, staying up till, how late is it there? And on the East Coast, we appreciate all of you being here tonight, and those of you who are participating. Hope to see you all at LiTFUSE. I'm going to go ahead and drop the registration page in the chat. And if I think most of you are signed up, but if not, there's still time, and pass it along to your friends. We'd love to see more people. LiTFUSE is such a special gathering of poets, and more of this, more community and poetry inspiration. So I just really encourage you to join us and spread the word. I want to encourage each of you to come back for our next session of our pre-programming events. The next time we'll meet will be August 29th, Tuesday, August 29th at 6:30. We will be with The Wandering Poets, Thoughts, Explorations, and Convergence with Richard Denner, who's here with us tonight, and Dominique Di Viharo, aka Jampa and Dom. And I just want to say again, thank you everyone for sharing such beautiful poems.
Thank you for sharing. Yes.
Yes, I am really inspired and excited for all that's to come. And we'll see you all back. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Lena. Everyone, have a great night.
You all.
Thank you all. Yeah, I can't wait to see everyone again at LiTFUSE. It's going to be amazing, and I look forward to seeing and talking to you all there.
Same. Super excited to be in person. Thank you, everyone, for sharing.